Hey guys, welcome back to Ripestories. In this video, an entitled Karen neighbor pretended to be a police officer and sent me over 20 parking tickets. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the video. So I have lived in suburbia for a while now and was happy about my decision to finally be able to afford a home after years of living in an apartment. One of the perks of my move meant that I would finally be able to drive the classic car that I inherited from my grandfather when he passed away. Even though I am female and some people think my brother should have gotten it, my grandpa and I shared a real passion for cars. But in my apartment I did not have any parking, and so I always used public transportation. Now I can enjoy driving to work or going on scenic drives on the weekend. What I didn't take into account though was to get references when it came to my neighbors, because the joy I had planned on having has not been the easiest to come by. Also, I'm someone who absolutely hates conflict and confrontation, which has made the whole situation even worse. I am a bookkeeper by trade, and that means that my contact with people is fairly limited other than requesting documents or asking financial related questions in some of the files at the firm where I work. While I have a beautiful home, I don't have any parking. This was one of the things that made the house quite affordable. There is, however, parking available on the street on a first-come, first-served basis. And generally, people are courteous and leave a spot in front of each house for the owner. However, my neighbor Karen, who happens to enjoy walking up and down the neighborhood sporting a custom neighborhood police uniform, says that my car is ugly and that I should be hiding it somewhere because it is bringing down the neighborhood value. My car is well maintained, is by no means a ramshackle, rusty or falling apart. To each their own, I said to Karen after she told me that. The kind of car everyone owns is a very personal choice, and I happen to like mine. But I can see it from my window, said Karen. Well, I'm sorry about that, I said apologetically, but I cannot change where my house sits in relation to yours, and I'm not going to park any further away. Well, couldn't you at least paint it? Asked Karen. That flamboyant yellow is hideous. I could feel my heart racing, but I managed to stand my ground and reply, I'm sorry, but no, that is the original paint color and I'm not gonna change it. It is the same color now as it was when my grandpa owned it, and that matters to me. Well, from that conversation forward, whenever I would see Karen, she would tell me about the car and how ugly it was for her. She even gave me some paint swatches that she had gotten at an auto body shop, however I declined them, reiterating what I'd already told her. I continued to park in my place and tried not to be out when Karen was doing anything on the street, like taking out the trash or picking up her mail. This made the situation extremely stressful for me. I did not like having to choose my movements. I was someone who enjoyed living their life and letting others do the same. I had never had so many difficulties in all the years that I'd been in my apartment, and there had been people who I shared walls with there. A few weeks after Karen had insisted on giving me the paint swatches, which I had refused to take, I found a parking ticket under my windshield wiper one morning when I went out to go to work. I couldn't help but notice that it looked slightly off, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. I of course felt frustrated as I put it into my briefcase. I looked around me and there were no indications that I had parked wrong, yet the ticket was for illegal parking. I had been parked like I always was, and I knew the parking rules on the street. I had never been advised that they had been changed either, however, I knew that Karen would love it if there was a way to keep me from parking my vehicle where she had to lay eyes on it. I decided to look into it later, but I ended up being extremely busy at work that day and in the preceding ones. Then it was the weekend and the parking authorities were closed. Monday morning, when I exited my home, I found another ticket on the car. This time I was absolutely livid. "Got caught, did you?" asked Karen, coming out of her house as I stared at my windshield. "Yes, but I don't know why," I replied. "I didn't do anything wrong." "The rules are for everyone," said Karen, "and your car does not fit into the rules of the street. It is longer than the rest of the cars and a brighter color." "Maybe so," I replied. But last time I checked, neither of those things was a crime, considering that I still fit in the parking space. "Maybe you should trade it for something more practical," said Karen. "Be better on gas for you and better on the ice for the rest of us." Would you stop with trying to make me feel bad that I own a car that I like and that means something to me? I'm not gonna trade it. I'm going to work and then I'm going to get to the bottom of this parking issue, I said. When I said that, I noticed that Karen looked nervous, but I wasn't sure if it was because she had something to do with me getting a ticket, like calling the authorities and giving them a phony story of some kind, or if it was because she had thought that I would just get rid of the car. Well, that day I skipped my lunch break so that I could leave the office early and head to the police department. There was a non-emergency desk there that dealt with issues such as parking. I was able to show them the 2 tickets that I'd received over the last week. "These aren't any of ours," said the desk clerk, "and there's nothing logged in the system under your name or license plate. These tickets are fake." "Why would someone do this?" I said. "I don't know," said the desk clerk. "Impersonation of a police officer or parking agent is illegal, and so is forgery. Whoever made these tickets would be in serious trouble if they were apprehended. They would face a fine and be charged criminally. They could even go to jail." "Well, what can I do about it?" I asked. "Well, not much, unless you catch who puts them on your vehicle. Has it happened to anyone else in your neighborhood?" said the desk clerk. "Not that I know of," I replied, "but I don't know my neighbors very well. I have one neighbor who hates the color of my car, but I don't even know if she would go so far as to forge a parking ticket." "You can never tell some things about people," said the desk clerk. "Don't hesitate to call us though if there's anything." Over the next few weeks, I continued to receive the fake parking tickets. Spoiler alert, in total, I would get around 20 plus. I was stressed by the situation despite knowing that the tickets were not real and that I would not be fined or arrested for having a slew of unpaid parking tickets. And as time went on, I found myself enjoying the car less because it felt like it was more trouble than it was worth. I knew that my grandpa wouldn't have wanted me to feel stressed because I owned it. I began to wonder if I should just offer it to my brother and go back to taking the bus. However, I also didn't want to let somebody get away with intimidating me or taking away my happiness, and therefore I felt torn about what I should do. Every fake ticket I received, I put in a folder and documented what time I received it. I expected that eventually Karen would get tired of giving me these fake tickets. I knew I was assuming it was her, but no one else ever commented about my car or made an issue of it. There was only Karen, who I continued to avoid as best as I could. I worried that she might escalate to another level. What would I do if she decided to slash my tires or cut my brakes or throw buckets of paint all over my car? I seriously felt like my safety was at risk here. I began to stay awake longer during the night, watching out the window in hopes that I could catch her or at least survey my vehicle, but I knew that this was not healthy for me and I had to do something. I wanted to be able to confront Karen about what was happening, but I knew that I would never be able to do it without breaking down from my stress, anxiety, and a lack of sleep. I took all the parking tickets to the police and showed them to the desk clerk that I'd initially shown them to. I told her more about Karen and she decided to send out an officer to further investigate now. Because 20 fake tickets was not only impersonation of the police that included forgery, but also harassment and an attack on my mental health. The police drove out in their marked car and parked behind my car on the street, and then they began canvassing the neighborhood. They wanted to see if anyone had seen or heard anything before speaking to Karen herself. I waited inside of my house with the door locked, and even though there were police outside, I wanted to feel extra safe. The police had probable cause to enter Karen's home, as they had already obtained a warrant because they had compared the signature on her driver's license with the forgery for a fake officer's name on the illegal tickets prior. They suspected that it was hers. The investigation in her home found the fake forms and Karen was arrested. She was later let out on a hefty bail agreement and told not to come anywhere near me or else there would be further consequences. I was relieved that I had broken my silence and gone to the police. I hoped that I would be able to sleep easier knowing that she was on the police's radar, even though she was still living next door. Well, months later, when Karen's case came to trial, she admitted to what she had done under oath and was fined for her actions. She had to agree to go to counseling and to stay away from me, and that any further intimidation of any of the neighbors would result in her being immediately arrested. It turned out that there were other neighbors that Karen had been bothering in many ways, and that when the officers had canvassed the neighborhood, they had learned about it. I was relieved to have the situation behind me, honestly. Despite the fact that Karen was still in the neighborhood, I hoped that her humiliation and the financial ramifications of the situation had forced her to learn a lesson. I had lost my joy for a while, but I was determined to regain my independence and freedom and not let the intimidation and false tickets get me down. They were now behind me and I was gonna drive my classic car and celebrate the connection that my grandpa and I had each day. He was no longer with me, but I had the car and all of the years of memories of us working on it. And yeah guys, the next story will be from r/Tales from the Squad Car, which is a very interesting subreddit that we don't really read enough. It is essentially either stories about police officers or stories from police. And I think this story is from the perspective of a police officer telling us a story. And by the way, if you've enjoyed the story so far, please don't forget to like the video, because that would help me tremendously. So this story is about John Doe, or well, let's call him Jim. Jim ran a red light, Jim got pulled over, Jim is polite and respectful, Jim hands over his ID, insurance, provides his current address and phone number, and Jim's lady friend in the front seat even hands over her ID unprompted. The officer then runs Jim, and Jim has a warrant for petty theft from a neighboring jurisdiction. Officer returns to Jim and tells him that he has a warrant and needs to step out of the car. Jim says, "What? I have a warrant?" and then proceeds to put his car in gear and take off, with 2-year-old Jim Jr. in the back without a car seat. Lucky for Jim, the agency pursuit policy prevents officers from following him. Unlucky for Jim, officers now know exactly who he is and where he lives. Officers proceed to file warrants for 6 charges against Jim. The warrants also serve to trigger an automatic violation of his probation. The funny thing is, there was only a $300 bond on the petty theft charge. He probably would have been released immediately if he could pay it. The even funnier thing is that warrant was no longer even an NCIC the next day, meaning it probably wouldn't have even been good. He would have been handcuffed, the warrant verified, and if no good, released immediately. The next day, Jim's lady friend called asking for her ID. "Sorry lady, it was mailed to the DMV, but she confirmed that the address Jim so kindly provided was a good one." A couple hours later, the officers from whom Jim fled paid him a visit. Now Jim is in jail serving the remainder of his previously suspended 180 days for the probation violation plus whatever the new charges bring. Jim is dumb, don't be like Jim. And the next one is another police story, but this time from r/malicious compliance. It is titled "Excuse for Speeding." So I was a physicist at an engineering school, and the older faculty liked to tell the story of a long-gone graduate student who tried to get cute with a police officer. He was speeding, going some 20 over the limit on I-95 and gets pulled over, and the cops asks him why he was speeding, etc. Being a physicist, he explains that the sudden cold snap overnight caused his tire pressure to fall, and he was speeding because the faster rotation of the wheels increases the heat and pressure within the tire, and it was safer to be driving slightly faster on a pressurized tires than at the speed limit on underinflated tires. The cop, amused, asked if what he said about tire pressures and speeding was true, and the young grad student replies, "Yes, absolutely, I'm a physicist at MIT. The cop then goes back to his vehicle and returns with 2 tickets, one for speeding and one for knowingly driving with underinflated tires, driving an impaired vehicle or something like that. Needless to say, this poor fellow became a very good example of times when intelligence is not a substitute for wisdom, and why it is poor form to flaunt your education to get out of being an asshat in traffic or otherwise. And by the way guys, I'm curious, let me know in the comments, where are you watching from today? It would be very interesting to know where my viewers are from. And the next one is a story from r/am_I_the_a_hole, and of course there's also an update, so please watch until the end to see the conclusion. Even though I, 23 female, am American, my parents are immigrants and therefore I have a different cultural upbringing than most. Well, one thing that was hammered into my head from a young age was to always bring a small gift when visiting anyone's house. It does not matter if it's family or friends or that one person you kinda know but don't really like, bringing something is a must. My boyfriend, 28 male, and I have been dating for almost 4 years now, and since we both work from home, he suggested we make dinner with his parents a weekly thing, since we have not been able to see each other much for obvious reasons. I love his parents, so obviously I agreed. Every week I made sure to bring something small to show my appreciation for them cooking for us. Of course, always using my own money. A small bottle of wine, their favorite dessert, some flowers, etc., and they always thanked me for it. This has been going on for a few months and absolutely didn't notice anything out of the ordinary until yesterday when my boyfriend and I were preparing to head over. I'd gotten a cute vase of daffodils since luckily I had found some in bloom and my boyfriend's mom really loves them, but my boyfriend suddenly got really mad and asked why I kept bringing stuff over every week like his parents were a charity case. Honestly, I got super confused and asked him what the problem was and that I've always done this with everyone, including his friends, since we met. That it was a cultural thing, but then he got even madder and told me to stop imposing my culture on everyone, and it's weird since I'm white. At that point, I did not feel like going anywhere with him and I just gave him the flowers and went for a walk while he drove over to dinner by himself. Afterwards he came home, he still had the flowers which he gave to me and told me he was sorry, but his parents really were super annoyed with me constantly bringing stuff over. Like they cannot take care of themselves, and later on I got a text from his dad asking me to not come over for dinner anymore. Now my boyfriend is giving me the cold shoulder unless I give his parents a huge apology, but really, I don't feel like I'm in the wrong for trying to be nice to them. And yeah, Ripestars, this is absolutely toxic. I mean, clearly OP is not the a-hole here, she is just being super nice, and these people, I don't know what's wrong with them, honestly. Anyway, let me know what you think about this in the comments. Quick edit, I did not realize you could edit posts directly, but I'm in a hurry to convince him to let me go over to his parents' house. I did post a brief update and FAQ in my most recent comment. Comment number 1 from Reddit, not the a-hole, and definitely talk to the parents. From your post and comments, it sounds like he said something to his parents, which is definitely a lie. Responding to flowers or dessert with, as if the two of them couldn't take care of themselves, sounds strange. Something is fishy here. Comment number 2, not the a-hole, it's called a hostess gift and even some white people have manners and give them. It sucks that his family is too trashy to understand classy manners. By the way, pretty sure the dad's text is more about the spin your boyfriend put on his crap fit, not anything to do with the hostess gift. It would be interesting to ask for clarification, but not worth it. And yeah, Ripestars, thankfully we now have an update to the entire situation, and it reads like this. First of all, I want to thank everyone for the overwhelming support and replies. So I'm looking forward to going over to everyone's houses for dinner, and I'll be sure to bring all the things you said you liked. Many flower lovers out there. I'm now also apparently the daughter-in-law to a lot of hopeful parents that replied as well, so I hope I can deliver on expectations. Well, after my last update, I told my boyfriend that I was sick and tired of him dancing around the issue with his parents, and I was going to go over to their house whether he liked it or not. At this point, I think he realized that whatever he was doing had backfired, so he sat down all angry and told me that he would explain. I sat and he told me that he had done something very spur of the moment and that he had texted me from his dad's phone and then blocked the number but begged me to listen. That he just needed to get his parents off me for a while and to not leave. Apparently his parents had started hinting at him about marriage. Since my boyfriend and I talked a lot about it, I fully expected to marry him, as I said in another comment, and was honestly expecting a proposal in late spring since that is when we met. 4 years dating didn't bother me, but I was getting excited to settle down. However, my boyfriend apparently realized that he absolutely did not want to commit to anything and wanted to experiment and have fun since I was not being fun anymore. Honestly, that just made me cry since we were each other's first for everything and usually very good at communicating our needs. His grand plan was to get him mad at me, so I would beg for forgiveness and then he would only accept an open relationship as an answer. Absolutely brilliant plan, I know. He had made up his parents getting mad but did not expect me to blow off dinner completely, and it's like hitting a jackpot, his words not mine. He went over for dinner, hid the flowers and said we had gotten into a huge fight, but he was gonna fix it, but I needed space. After he confessed all this, he said he was sorry but really didn't want to miss out on new experiences when he was still young, and would I consider an open relationship but pretend ours was strained with his parents so they wouldn't get suspicious? And I laughed. I laughed his ass right out of the door and told him absolutely not and to leave me alone while I packed because I wanted to have some new experiences too. He never stopped begging me to stay, but I left to sleep at a friend's place. After calming down for a few days, I cemented the breakup and finally actually went over to his parents. My ex-boyfriend's dad never even noticed the phone missing, but still apologized, and his mom was a mess. I did and still love them and will eat dinner there without him as often as I can. I won't lie that I'm sad about 4 years down the drain, but that is life. And if that was my ex's best possible plan, then I dodged a bullet by a mile. And here, Ripestars, wow, I gotta say, that story took such a turn, and I'm so happy that OP basically dodged a bullet here. Even though, as she said, 4 years down the drain, but it's better for her to stop now than to get married to this guy. Still, I feel so bad for what happened to her. Honestly, that boyfriend was crazy and abusive, and I would not wish that on anyone. And before we end the video, we will read one last story from r/pettyrevenge. It is titled Netflix, you gotta get your act together on Gmail addresses. So there's this dude in Australia who keeps using a non-dotted form of my email to sign up for things. This last week it was Netflix. I was tempted to just say the hell with it. This is the guy though who thought signing up for Ashley Madison with that address was a great idea too. But then he upped it by ordering a bunch of stuff and using the address for that too. Okay, I am done. I VPN'd to Australia, logged into Netflix, changed the password, closed his account, and disconnected the one device he was using. Maybe if it costs him something, he will get the idea. For the closure reason, I told Netflix, this account was opened using my email without my permission, and F this guy. And yeah guys, thank you for watching, please don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you again tomorrow.